3.4 miles, 15 corners, 10 of them right, 5 of them left, hard braking into turns 1 and into turn 9, both for good overtaking opportunities. A couple of riders being caught out by that tricky left-hander turn 2 yesterday, including our fastest rider on day 1, Pedro Acosta. Got to be careful managing the tyres down through turn 12 and into turn 3 in particular. Most demanding braking points, 1. Got to be careful managing the tyres down through turn 12 and into turn 3 in particular. Most demanding braking points, 1, 4 and 15. 5 weeks. It's been an intense period in this year's World Championship. The 4 flyways in Japan, Indonesia, Australia and Malaysia. It all comes to a conclusion here this afternoon. Over 10 laps of sprint action and 20 laps in the main Grand Prix for the MotoGP field that was led yesterday by KTM's young hotshot Pedro Acosta. Spanish rider, despite 2 crashes very early on in FP1 and in yesterday afternoon's practice, fastest on day 1 for just the 2nd time in MotoGP career was the 21-year-old. The only other previous time Acosta has led the way on day 1 was on our first visit to the Balaton Park circuit in Hungary, just shortly after the summer break. It was a bit of an unpredictable day yesterday with some mixed weather around, some rain that fell towards the back end of FP1. Pedro Acosta, it was that led the way. A Honda in 2nd place thanks to Johan Zarco, a Yamaha in 3rd with Jack Miller finding his way up into the top 3. Joan Mir was 4th on another Honda, and Fabio Quartararo 4 Japanese bikes inside the top 5 at the end of day 1. Top Ducati was the Gian Antonio in 6th, just ahead of his VR46 teammate Frankie Morbidelli. Also safely through to Q2, Pol Espargaro shining once again, left the time of the Maverick Vinales. Alex Marquez, like Acosta, had 2 crashes yesterday, and Alex Rins, who despite a last lap crash at turn 5, just crept into that all-important top 10. Q1, well, it is stacked. They're always stacked, aren't they, these days, Q1 sessions. Marini, Bagnaia, Aldeguer, and Marco Bezzecchi, who's been fastest on our last 3 Fridays prior to yesterday. 4 riders to keep a close eye on in the upcoming Q1 session. Phillip Island Grand Prix winner Raul Fernandez also has to go through Q1. Only 2 spots available, of course, coming out of that opening 15-minute session. 30 minutes, though, of practice to kick off Sprint Saturday, first and foremost in the company of Matt Burton, Lewis Sutherby in the commentary box, Jack Appleyard down in pit lane. A 157.559 from Acosta, despite his 2 slip-ups yesterday. Put him top of the pile, just on the 200 clear of Johan Zarco. One of 5 riders, Costa, Zarco, Miller, Mir and Quartararo, they were able to find laps in the 57s yesterday.
Very difficult to know truly what we learned yesterday in truth. So unusual to see the kind of running order that we did. Of course, we had the rain shower midway through the session, which interrupted practice and essentially created a mini qualifying session in the final 10 minutes as everyone rushed out when the rain stopped. Try and get a lap in. A few made mistakes on their final runs and find themselves in qualifying 1. Alex Marquez, despite a mistake of his own pre-rain shower, does find himself in qualifying 2 on a day when he could, if he wins the sprint later on, be crowned as the runner-up of the MotoGP World Championship, completing a Marquez brotherly 1-2.
It's an eventful day for 4 of our top 10 yesterday. Costa fastest, 2 crashes. Alex Marquez creeping into Q2, 2 crashes. Jack Miller and Alex Rins on Yamahas also through directly into Q2, despite tumbles across the opening day yesterday. Well, Marco Bezzecchi's fast Friday form completely deserted him yesterday, didn't it? Fastest on Friday in Japan, likewise in Mandalika and in Phillip Island, but Bez with work to do on a factory, pretty struggling to get the power off the ground on around some of the hard acceleration zones here in Sepang. 15th quickest yesterday was Bezzecchi, over 8 tenths behind Acosta.
So the work to do is Pecco Bagnaia, who's not quite as disconsolate as he was in Australia. He crashed out of the Grand Prix. Dominic Peko. He posted it on Instagram earlier in the week. Certainly doesn't feel as bad as he did in Indonesia or in Australia, but clearly nowhere near as strong as he was in Motegi. Bagnaia in qualifying one once again. But in fairness to Peko, that was perhaps more down to an error on his part and not maximising that final time, particularly in the final sector. Bagnaia just not quite getting the ideal run through there. He did have the speed to be in qualifying two, but he is in a stacked Q1 which features the last 3 Grand Prix winners.
Sixth time this year, Bagnaia finds himself in our opening qualifying session. Val Fernandez. Of course, we now have back-to-back first-time winners in our last 2 Grand Prix. First time that's happened in 5 years. Fermin Aldeguer prevailed in Mandalika. Ralph Fernandez was superb, wasn't he? Less than a week ago, down under in Australia. Fernandez was only 16th fastest. Another rider on the Aprilia was struggling to find some rear grip, particularly on a corner exit. No problemos whatsoever, though, on practice Friday for Johann Zarco. Good to see him back at the sharp end. Good to see him riding with some confidence once again. Confidence has been drained away over a period of races, but yesterday, certainly in terms of front feelings, Zarco looking much like his old self. Second quickest. There was a couple of times we picked up Zarco on his hot laps, and he was spectacular to watch. Well, he was going all in for that Q2 spot. And the second time this year on a Friday, Zarco's been inside the top 3 along with the Czech Grand Prix in Brno.
Really attacking, wasn't he? Both of the French riders really going for it yesterday, 2nd and 5th. Fabio Quartararo taking that 5th place. And of course, there'll be nobody ruling him out when we get to qualifying 2 in about an hour and a quarter from now. But Fabio Quartararo, who's receiving an early proposal on this Saturday morning. I think he's nodding at the question that's just been put his way. I'm not so sure he's seen that on the screens, although certainly is taking that as an acceptance. But either way, Fabio Quartararo, his greatest concerns at the moment are a Yamaha that's not quite behaving how he wants. This place does paper over some of the cracks, really, from Quartararo's point of view. No real feeling, no real pace, he said, on quite a slippery Sepang track yesterday. Quartararo might find himself high at the grid, but once again feels he's going to be slipping back down the order once he does it.
It's fair to say those two are genuine hardcore Fabio Quartararo fans. I do know those two, actually. I'll name check them as well. Granton and Stacey Copeland made the journey from Australia. Welcome, guys. So many Australians have travelled to this Sepang International Circuit for this 20th round of the campaign. Brad Binder, another big name. Lots of South Africans here this weekend to support the Rebel KTM Factory racing rider. Tough practice for the majority of that hour-long session yesterday for Binder, who was stuck right at the wrong end of the timesheets. He did rally late on and find a 58.739. That was only good enough, though, to bring Binder up into 17th place. And once again, the message coming loud and clear out of KTM, including from the fastest rider, Pedro Acosta. Yeah, we've clearly demonstrated we've got the one-lap pace, but Acosta, once again, fearing the dreaded tyre wear, might be the undoing of KTM, particularly over the full race distance of 20 laps here tomorrow afternoon.
Got a big shot in the sprint, doesn't it, later on? But of course, you've got to qualify well to have any chance of that. Pedro Acosta on a pretty good sprint run. Podiums in 2 of the last 3 sprints. Podium in Brno and Austria too. So Saturday's a practice where Pedro Acosta has done his best work. Saturday afternoons, that is. Seen him on the front row of a MotoGP grid all season long. Is today his best chance to change that? 7 of his last 8 Grand Prix finishes have been top 5, but only 3 podiums in the last 8 Grand Prix. So there's a 30-minute practice session, then gets underway. It's been the story of the weekend so far, really, here in Sepang. We haven't been really blessed with too much blue sky since the track opened yesterday morning for Moto3 FP1. And once again, the MotoGP pack head out on field for FP2 under rather overcast and grey, gloomy conditions. It is at least keeping it relatively cool by Sepang standards. From this real oven-like conditions, hair-dry-like conditions when you're racing MotoGP bikes around this 5.5 kilometre Sepang International Circuit, but that heavy cloud cover at least has made it feel somewhat cooler than usual. What we're also seeing as a result of that, track temperature yesterday in practice was only 37 degrees you don't expect track temperatures in excess of 50 here in Sepang, typically when the sun is out. It means that they're not really switching that medium rear tyre on when they go out on it, which means that we could have a scenario tomorrow where the vast majority of the field actually race the soft rear tyre, which does have quite an appreciable drop on it, because of course that will be expected to be ran in qualifying, also in the sprint this afternoon. But with the medium so slow, riders are finding that it's perhaps better off just taking the pain of the soft rear tyre drop, because you're going to be too far behind by the time the medium comes in if you start on that tyre. Looking at the tyre sheet in this free practice 2 session, everyone's gone out of track with the exception of Alex Marquez so far. We've only got 3 riders who've gone out on that medium rear tyre: Sokjet Checha, Juan Mir and Ferdinand Aldeguer. Everybody else has gone out on the soft rear.
Aldeguer was in somewhat of a false position, he felt, yesterday. Felt that there was plenty more to offer than 13 fastest. Aldeguer's best time in that practice session, coming on lap 3 of 50. He really missed out late on when everybody was in sort of panic mode, time attack mode, when the mixed weather was coming. Fastest for the first time on a Friday morning in his MotoGP career. Keep an eye on Aldeguer. He's going to be a big for one of those 2 spots to get directly out of Q1 coming up later on this morning. An excellent Friday once again with Juan Mir. He was super happy. Said the RT213V factory Honda worked straight out of the pit lane yesterday. And when that feeling arises, all you can do is making minor adjustments on the bike. You're not chasing your tail in terms of the setup. That awesome front feeling allows you to play with the bike on corner entry. Keep an eye on Mir. We've already seen him on this overseas tour. Like he's podiumed up with HRC in Japan. Looks like he's going to be a big contender for the podium in the sprint and the Grand Prix here tomorrow. Well, Pedro Acosta, another great performance by the 21-year-old Spaniard yesterday. 2 crashes, but he picked himself up the finish in P1 on day 1. And he'd be in that battle for pole position and sprint glory on this sprint track. Let's get the thoughts to the boss. Guy, who's with Jack. Good morning, guys.
Yeah, good morning to everybody. I'm sure Pedro will be hopefully be in that fight for pole position. Of course, remarkably, Aki, they've not had a front row start all year long. It's about time we see him on the front row, right?
For sure. It's fine. Okay, yesterday was promising and was not really easy. Monday was, the morning was a little bit for nothing, and afternoon, let's say, was starting to play again. But it was really positive yesterday, especially for Pedro, that he finds the rhythm.
When Pedro came to speak to us yesterday, he was speaking about how proud he was in the information he was giving to the team, how his feedback he felt has improved a lot throughout the year. Could you just let us know in what ways his feedback has improved to allow him to get to the point where he's showing such a consistent level now?
I think I mentioned it already before a few times, that how Pedro grew up. We have to remember his second year running MotoGP, and how he grew up during the year, how he grew up during his career. Everything happened quick, and of course, that is going to
Of course, going into tomorrow, I think tyre life is going to be the big question in regards to KTM. You had some problems with it when we're here for the test in February. Recent Grand Prix, it's been a challenge as well. Again, it's a big opportunity for you guys.
It's exactly like you say, that few races, like and also last race in Australia, it was an issue for us on Sunday. So of course that's something, let's say, the main focus, so one main point to focus now. And unfortunately yesterday we didn't lap as planned, but that's good.
Good luck, Aki. Have a good one.
Thanks, Paul.
Jack, thanks as always to Aki Ayo, a Red Bull K2 factory racing boss, who won't be thankful for me reading out this statistic. Is now 90 Grand Prix since KTM were last victorious in a dry MotoGP race. Can Pedro Acosta be our third different first-time winner in the last 3 Grand Prix over 20 laps here? There's going to be some fierce competition. It looks like Honda could be in the game as Luca Marini, another big name, that's going to try and have to get out of that heavyweight Q1 session coming up shortly. Marini was close, really close, just 600ths away from bumping out Alex Rins.
We're going to qualifying 1 later on with so many big games in it. We're going to guarantee to see some previous winners outside the front four rows of the grid. Raul Fernandez, Bagnaia, Nora, who looked fairly strong yesterday, Marini, Nini, who's had some recent qualifying problems. Only Europa Turda and are going to come through that Q1 session later on. And there are at least two of those who you feel have got the potential to fight for victory here this weekend. Aldeguer, one of them. Who knows whether Luca Marini could be too, as he goes into second place in this session, and Pecco Bagnaia potentially another two. As mentioned, Bagnaia in Q1 for perhaps a slightly different reason this weekend than we have in recent Grand Prix. It doesn't look anywhere near the depths of despair that we saw from Bagnaia in Indonesia and in Australia. But once again, he finds himself with an extra 15 minutes of work ahead of him, and not an easy route through into Q2 either.
Loves the Sepang circuit though. Bagnaia won that FP battle with Jorge Martin last year to take his 50th MotoGP podium. Yellow flags out in sector one. It's Ayagura. Black ass MotoGP rider has gone down quickly back uprights. Looks like a little front end washout at turn one for Agura. Just looking to build a 2:00.343. Mostly Japanese rider, 14th yesterday at the end of play. That was Agura-san. Last time out in Australia, 11th points finish in a Grand Prix and 14th start. Two top fixes though to his name so far in this rookie season. It's Fabio Quartararo moves up into P2 with a 158.797. Pretty pessimistic he sounded yesterday. Quartararo said this Sepang circuit super slippery, greasy, no grip means no great pace as far as Yamaha are concerned. He was really worried that potential for some overnight rain would wash away all of yesterday's rubber and send the M1 back to square one. At the moment, lap times obviously we're not in sort of time attack mode where we saw mid-57s yesterday, but yeah, the times I think have been a lot slower than what we anticipated, given the fact that the track not really offering optimal grip so far this weekend.
Last year here, Pecco Bagnaia took pole position. One of those incredible qualifying sessions head-to-head that we saw through the year with Jorge Martin. It was a 156.337. They're still over a second away from that in terms of the fastest laps we've seen this weekend. It cost us 57.5 yesterday. But of course, Robbie was over 2 seconds away from that in this session, with riders focusing on the race. And of course, what we saw yesterday with the rain midway through the session, most riders did get a decent chunk of homework in, but some had to abandon their sort of race preparation yesterday in practice, their setup work, their understanding of tyre degradation, because they had to go early on a soft-rear tyre to try and dodge any rain that was coming.
Quartararo's having a pretty good start to this sprint Saturday. We're on board with it now, down through turn 12. Oh, come on, that more yellow flags out in the first sector. We've already seen Agura go down at the first corner. Next one is where Alex Marquez is just approaching on the 73. Yellow flags out once again in that one section. Alex, just before we headed to that first corner, saw Augusto Fernandez then. The development V4 powered wide start M1. That's the second tip-off of the weekend for Augusto. He was on the floor yesterday at turn 9. What about a fellow Yamaha rider? Third at the moment for Quartararo. This might well be the fastest time in the morning so far. Not quite, it was close, really close. Just 4 thousandths of a second he is behind Aldeguer. We've got 3 rides actually fired in 158.7s. Aldeguer, Quartararo and Alex Marquez. Less than 300ths covering that top 3.
A very bit of a face of fun at the time with Fabio Quartararo so far this weekend. Stopwatch at the moment is telling him a very good story. It's more interesting, I think, to see what kind of lap times these riders are doing at the end of the session and just what kind of drop-off we see on that soft rear tyre as to whether it is a viable race option. I think ideally the riders would want to go for the soft if it will go the distance with the medium. It's isn't really gelling, it's really firing up on this fantastic circuit, which doesn't have the kind of track temperature that we're used to around here. Aldeguer is on that medium rear though at the moment, a brand new medium rear to start the session. He's continuing to lap very consistently at the moment in the high 158. 58.7 is his best of the session, which is near enough matched on lap 5.
The riders yesterday were referencing how bumpy that first corner is now around this surface at Sepang. I wonder whether that might just be a factor that's caught out Agura and Augusto Fernandez. At the top then, with the gap between Alex Marquez and third and Marini in 4th place. Fastest rider on Friday was Pedro Acosta. If you look at his crew chief, Ultravathon. So Augusto Fernandez, who like Agura was able to quickly pick up that clashed wide start M1. And they come back into the pits. Yeah, just a little tip off on the right-hand side with the aid of a bunch of our volunteer marshals doing sterling work as always. Just feel like maybe the front brake protector was knocked off there for Augusto Fernandez, as another Yamaha test rider, Andrea Dovizioso, looks on. Key member now of the Yamaha's backroom team, not only riding and developing that V4 powered M1, but also now sort of a consultant, advisor, mentor role, call it what you will, offering some advice to the likes of Fabio Quartararo and Alex Rins and co.
It's fair to say that that V4 Yamaha didn't necessarily receive rave reviews yesterday from Augusto Fernandez, described as a bit of a hard day at the office. Of course, we are heading into a very crucial month now for Yamaha, with the Valencia test coming up in 24 days now, the Tuesday after the Valencia Grand Prix, where Fabio Quartararo is going to want to see some genuine evidence that that bike can take him to podiums and regular victories next season, as Bezzecchi's certainly pushing his Aprilia through turn 14. But at the moment, the Yamaha is still running at maybe 60-70% of its overall capabilities. They're eventually going to have to tune that thing up to 100% and show Fabio what it's capable of.
Yeah, Fernandez was pretty much saying flat out yesterday that Yamaha, in his opinion, have been too conservative in terms of how much power they're chucking into that new V4 motor. Of course, they will be looking for durability. This is as much about reliability testing as performance testing, but yesterday through the speed traps, that V4 was 10 kilometres down on the fastest KTM. At the moment, once again, 12 k's down on Pedro Acosta's RC16, which is no disgrace really. I mean, the KTM we know is the fastest motorcycle in Grand Prix history. When your test rider is saying, come on guys, we've got to start taking more risks here, we've got to start feeding more power into this V4, because of course, once you have more power, well, it can just completely change the handling, the characteristics of the bike. It changes the electronic setups you need, engine braking, traction control. Yeah, it does seem that maybe Fernandez was becoming a little bit frustrated that Yamaha's got to start winding up the whip a little bit, turning up the power on that V4 to try and really understand and unleash its full potential.
Yes, they don't want the public embarrassment of the bike blowing up, but that's kind of what testing's for ultimately. You've got to test things to the point of braking to ultimately know what it's capable of. So Yamaha at the moment not able to truly understand that. Pecco Bagnaia now building up into this Malaysian Grand Prix weekend as he goes top on a 158.585. Pecco Bagnaia, a two-time Malaysian Grand Prix winner in MotoGP. He finished a Moto2 championship here. He won a Moto3 race here on the Mahindra. So this is one of Pecco Bagnaia's historically strongest circuits, and coming through Q1 later on, well, his work cut out, but at the moment the pace is there for Pecco.
Coming back to Yamaha, this is not the time to be conservative. This is not the time to be holding back on the risk taking when you have got Fabio Quartararo making big noises about the fact that if that V4 is not competitive in the opening part of 2026, it will be au revoir at Yamaha as far as Quartararo is concerned. He won't be hanging about waiting for the V4 to shine, whether it be in the current 1000cc capacity format or moving forward into 2027 when it drops down to an 850cc configuration. He does not have time. Have been patient enough, he feels, with the Iwata engineers. Now it's time to deliver. He wants to be finding the podiums and victories as two of our former MotoGP world champions just acknowledge each other, making sure that they weren't impeding each other on that run through the first couple of corners. Yeah, Yamaha are on borrowed time as far as Fabio Quartararo's patience is concerned.
Of course, we're 4 days away too from public testing debut. Toprak Razgatlioglu, there are reports that we might see him get a chance to jump on a Yamaha in Aragon before then, but certainly in terms of public testing debuts, the first we will see of Toprak, the newly crowned three-time World Superbike champion, will be on that Yamaha M1 the Tuesday following the Valencia Grand Prix. So many stories worth following. We'll of course be covering that entire test live for you.
Sadly, a test which will not feature Marc Marquez on the 93 factory Ducati. I'm sure you're well aware of the news that broke on the eve of this Malaysian Grand Prix. Sadly, the shoulder injury which Marc suffered a couple of weeks ago over in Mandalika, the contact from Marco Bezzecchi on lap one, that is a season-ending injury. Marc Marquez, yet another long and painstaking winter rehab coming the way for the 32-year-old Spaniard. Dates for your diary, Marquez fans, February the 3rd, 2026 will be the next time we see Marc on board in MotoGP machine. Alex Marquez, in after 2 falls yesterday, put himself briefly up to as high as second in this session. He's currently in 4th spot. Let's get an update on the 73 from Jack.
Yeah, of course, Alex didn't come and speak to the media yesterday. The team saying he was just suffering with a little bit of pain from that first of his 2 crashes. Dr. Angel Charter, the MotoGP medical director, was just waiting for him in the back of the box after that first run completed. A quick 30-second conversation between the two. A thumbs up from Alex, then a shake of the head, I imagine, to a question saying that he got any pain or something of that ilk, and Dr. Charter is on his way back. So all of those concerns regards to any injury problems for Alex Marquez looks to be completely over, and he can get down to business this morning.
Yeah, not the most comfortable. Thanks very much, Jack. Not the most comfortable Friday at times for the 29-year-old Spaniard. Winner of the sprint here back in 2023, second that year in the Grand Prix as well. A MotoGP podium, which won in the championship 6 years ago in 2019. Sepang has been a pretty hunting ground lately for Alex as he looks to secure that second in the World Championship. What was a very rapid repair job. Cosmetic damage to the right-hand side of that new V4 Yamaha as Augusto Fernandez to work once again on some more crucial development miles. Fernandez at 2:00.942 is his best work so far.
We'll see him wildcard 1-4 before the season is over. He will be also at the Valencia Grand Prix. Of course, that V4 will be in the hands of all of Yamaha's riders at the Valencia test, but Augusto Fernandez will race it at the final Grand Prix of this season, so we will see him again in a couple of weeks' time.
Luca Marini, first time he's not advanced directly in the Q1 since the Red Bull Ring in Austria, which just shows the purple patch in time attacks that the Italian has been able to demonstrate of late. He's putting together another really good lap right now, isn't he? Here's Marini, qualified in 6th place. He's in a real rich vein of form. First time in back-to-back Grand Prix. He's had top 6s on the RC213V. But not had 3 successive top 6s on Sundays, Marini, in 3 years. Jello Catalunya and the Saxony. Coming to the 4, aren't they, HRC? They're back here testing again next week on the 2026 prototype with Aleix Espargaro jetting in yesterday from Europe. Confirming Aldeguet, unfortunately missing out on a great place in Q2 yesterday, but quite clearly he's got great pace and he's been leading some part of this morning's session. Alex Marquez looking strong despite the pain in the neck from 2 crashes yesterday, so I'm sure it's fine. Hopefully a front row attack for both Mazzini riders coming up later on in Q2. Let's go to the front to the boss, Michele Mazzini. Who's it, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Camino's impressed everybody in the opening 20 minutes of this one. Top on the title, so was for a long while with the medium rear tyre. Michele, it looks as though his weekend all comes down to the upcoming 15 minutes in Q1. If he can get out of that, it's game on.
Yeah, we try of course to take an advantage before or sure to go for the two. So far when also good for us because we take a lot of stuff, especially for tomorrow race. Then we see.
Alex, a really tricky day yesterday. I think everybody had him down as the favourite coming into the weekend, but didn't get off to the best start. Just quickly, on his physical condition, how is he? Because we didn't get the chance to speak to him yesterday.
On the next one, he is good. And now, yes, he's back one. For feeling the track. Stay on the top 3 position, I think.
Mentioned yesterday he didn't find that second to get him really comfortable. Where exactly is he not feeling too comfortable now?
A strange feeling with the rear tire, especially with the feeling, because here we come in a track that is not so much. He take off some tire on the tarmac, so you need to have a constant day to improve and to work the bike. So I think that today will no rain to put a lot of tire on the track. Like that solution to Alex.
Thanks, Michele.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks as always, Jack. Thanks to Michele Mazzini. But now they're getting been pushed back down to 3rd place because we've seen this pretty good stint being produced by Luca Marini ongoing and could get better. Marini down to 158.646 on his last lap. That's only 600ths behind his VR46 Academy stablemate Bagnaia. This could be the best lap of the morning so far from Marini. Charges the number 10 Honda out of the final corner, goes through the gearbox, over the line it goes. It is indeed the fastest time at Sprint Saturday so far. 58.415 then from Marini, and he's quite comfortably now clear of the chasing pack. Almost 2 tenths ahead now of Bagnaia.
Well, inevitably, there's talk, of course, of Pedro Acosta becoming the third consecutive brand new winner in MotoGP and getting a 19th full-time 2025 rider to have won a MotoGP race, but you shouldn't forget that Luca Marini could do that too. With the kind of form that he's demonstrating so far, just some hope from Marini's point of view that he's not going to be the big victim of that heavyweight qualifying one coming up with both Bagnaia and Aldeguer in that session. It is going to be a test for Marini to come through Q1. In fact, if you look at the top 3 at the moment in this free practice 2 session, they're all coming up in Q1 shortly.
His first Grand Prix victory came right here in Sepang back in 2018. Lee Davis, his then teammate Bagnaia, won the world title. And the former other two teammates are top of the pile here, 1 and 2 in this session. Once again we get the first corner braking shot of Joan Mir with that rear tyre popping and skipping all over the place on the factory Honda. Might look a bit scrappy, but it's fast, and that's the most important thing as far as Mir's concerned. Both factory Hondas once again right at the sharp end. Marini fastest, Mir fourth quickest. He's got himself into those mid 58s as well. Aldeguer now in 5th, Quartararo once again in 6th. So having had 4 Japanese bikes inside the top 5 at the end of play yesterday, we've got 3 inside the top 6 at the moment. Marini, Mir and Quartararo. Zarco's inside the top 10 once again in 9th. Zarco was strong yesterday, of course. What about across? These 10 have been led the way on day 1.
Morbidelli just saw there as laps into 2nd place now, so it's a VF46 Academy 1-2-3. Marini, Morbidelli and Pecco Bagnaia. Morbidelli, who took his worst qualifying of the season in Indonesia and then went 4 worse in Australia, 17th on the grid and only scored 1 point in the whole weekend. It was a miserable weekend for Morbidelli, where he struggled with instability all through the weekend. And a circuit, of course, where he did laps here back in pre-season testing on the same GP24, of course, that he's on now. Morbidelli looking a little bit more like his old self.
Another rider that's won a Moto2 World Championship right here in Sepang, along with Alex Marquez. Those two have 15 times we've seen a Grand Prix World title wrapped up here in Sepang. We're getting a 16th here this weekend. Of course, we've got a GP and Moto3 long done and dusted. And the thrilling and nail-biting title fight in Moto2 between Diogo Moreira and current leader Manu Gonzalez. Well, that looks like it might go all the way down to the wire in Valencia next month. Just 2 points splitting that pairing going into tomorrow's 17-lap Grand Prix Malaysia in Moto2. He was really outsourced for the Phillip Island. It was his worst finish since Portimao 2024. That was right at the beginning of last season, and of course he was just working his way back to fitness, and they had that nightmare crash pre-season on production Ducati in Portimao.
Bagnaia's 2025 in a nutshell, really. There, the rear snapping sideways as he tried to get the Ducati GP25 stopped for turn 4. Pecco Bagnaia, whilst he might look more competitive, he is more competitive. He's certainly in the game in the top 3 at the moment, just a 10.5 pace of Marini, but it is still far from a comfortable ride for Pecco Bagnaia. In some respects, he might be better off just not thinking about the feeding and just looking at the stopwatch. It's not looking as bad as it might feel on the bike for him.
He and Ducati have been underperforming of late, understeer. That was the big issue once again yesterday for Bagnaia. When that rear tyre kicks sideways, and right at that point there, as soon as it gets back into line, it just chucks a whole load of weight over the front tyre. And Bagnaia then can't make the corner. He has to just release that front brake a little bit. Not starting towards the apex. What used to be Bagnaia's super strength on board that Desmos Vici is now one of his key weak points. Once again yesterday, like we saw in the Phillip Island warm-up last Sunday, he came out of turn 14 in practice. We saw another clear indication of a big high-speed wobble, the instability which has been plaguing Bagnaia so many races now. Can't seem to get their heads around what was causing this issue and how they solved it. Because of course, if they knew what the problem was, they would have solved it a long, long time ago with the Bologna boffins inside that garage. Raul Fernandez then. He's got a lot of work to do. He got Q1 16th yesterday. I really want to see Fernandez as a front-running force far this weekend, but to be fair, we haven't really seen Aprilia as a front running force so far this weekend, unlike they were in Mandalika in particular and in Australia last weekend. Don't forget, 6 days ago in Australia, we saw two Aprilias on the Grand Prix podium together for the first time in 2.5 years. That hadn't happened since the Catalan Grand Prix, midway through 2023, with late Spargo, Maverick Vinales. They've hit a bit of a butter though so far this weekend. No drive grip was the main complaint from all the Aprilias yesterday here.
Yeah, fair to say that this circuit has often been the weak circuit from an Aprilia point of view. Of course, our hopes were raised by their recent hot streak, not just for Marco Bezzecchi, but also, as mentioned, for Raul Fernandez and his victory in Australia. Of course, he's coming here on the back of consecutive sprint podiums, a third in Indonesia, a second in Australia. It will take something truly heroic for Raul Fernandez to back that up with sprint victory here this afternoon. We're going to sprint it over 10 laps later on this afternoon, 3 p.m. local time. As always, we'll be underway for our 20th TISO sprint of 2025.
Fought his way up to 10th in the World Championship now. There's Raul Fernandez with this brilliant burst of form. With Maiden, a bit of a twitch on the rear tyre there. The Costa was going out of that turn 15. He's now hard on the brakes. Gura and Fernandez have both been caught out in the early part of this FP2 session. Navarro still inside the top 6. Negotiates that tricky left-hander of turn 2. Let's have a listen to Fabio as he goes through 3. Turn 3 is where you really are having to manage the rear tyre late on, particularly over the 20 laps of the main Grand Prix here tomorrow. Turn 3, you short shift there, 3rd to 4th gear. On that curve, as you start to climb up towards turn 4, it's just under 200 kilometres an hour when you pull up the curve and charge up towards 5th gear, about 285 kilometres an hour, just on that rise up to then the 2nd gear, turn 4.
Quartararo's pace actually compares quite favourably against what everyone else is doing on the track at the moment. Quartararo's just at a 58.7, that's his 9th lap of the session. Aldeguer's also just done a 158.7. He's now 10 laps into his morning's work. Juan Mir's doing low 59s out on the circuit, so too is Alex Marquez. Di Gianantonio's also just done a low 59, his first lap of the morning on a 159.3. So if we are talking about genuine race pace that we're seeing at the moment and race preparation on that soft rear tyre, Aldeguer continuing to look super strong. Quartararo not a million miles away either.
Really fastest with a 58.415. Going to be hard work, incredibly hard work to get himself out of Q1, but if he does so, he's looking like a strong contender for his first front row in 2 years. Qatar 2023, the last time we saw Marini qualifying inside the top 3 as later Spargo will be busy out on track next week, putting in more kilometres on the 2026 prototype RT213 rig, which he will hand over to both Mir and Marini at the Valencia test next month. They've confirmed on the screens of that best time from Marini, 158.415. Excellent work this Marini, if it wasn't for the fact that he had that guy Aldeguer, Bezzecchi and Fernandez for company around him in that battle for those 2 places in Q2. Felt like he got a real good crack at getting out of that opening 50 minutes. That's because he still does have, but in some fierce competition around him. Being led by this rider, Aldeguer, who sweeps back into pit lane. Been a good session this from Aldeguer, keeping a close eye on his pace, very, very consistent. There's Alex Rins, who took a late tumble yesterday in practice at turn 5. Well, he's ending another session in the gravel trap, isn't he? Is Alex this time around? He's just running in hot into the final corner, turn 14. He might have actually stayed on 2 wheels here. I think the gravel's just so deep and just going to be a bit of assistance to glide out of it here. So, yeah, luckily for Alex, it's not one to add to his crash count.
Seeing Alex Rins in qualifying 2 very, very shortly. Need to continue his very good recent run. Been in qualifying 2 now in the last couple of Grand Prix and top 10 finishes in each of the last 2. And there's a lot about how difficult the last couple of years has been for Alex Rins, largely due to injuries than through any lack of performance from the him. But his 7th place in Australia, remarkably, was his best Grand Prix result since he won the Grand Prix of the Americas at the beginning of 2023.
First time he's ever had back-to-back top 10s on board Yamaha. Fabio Quartararo comes back into the factory box as we look at Pol Espargaro. He just keeps performing wonders, doesn't he? Replacing Maverick Vinales on the Tech 3 KTM. Last 3 Grand Prix has appeared in. Ending Friday in 8th place, directly through to Q2 once again. That has gone Calicio. He's still adamant that he's happy being a part-time racer. He said he's got no interest, not entertaining any aspect of looking to come back as a full-time rider in the future. What about his teammate Bastianini, who was suffering once again yesterday? Rather boringly, the words coming out of the Italian. Once again, battling this weird sensation that every track he comes to on a Friday, it's like he's riding the KTM for the very first time. He's struggling to find any positives. Zero confidence to push. It was rather used beast once again yesterday. He's making a little bit more of a fist of it this morning, up into 18th spot. So at least one place higher than he finished day one.
His riding style just does not extract the best out of a soft tyre on that KTM either, which is why he always qualifies deep in the pack. Since Barcelona, of course, where he was on the podium, we haven't seen him on the front 5 rows of a MotoGP grid, which doesn't bode well for the Q1 session coming up. A heavyweight Q1, which we're all looking forward to. Jack's got some thoughts.
Yeah, I tell you what, I've been as excited for this Q1 session as any all year round, because I've been looking at the lap times of that session, and you can genuinely say Luca Marini, Pecco Bagnaia, Fermin Aldeguer and Marco Bezzecchi are all genuine podium and race-winning contenders if and only if they get out of Q1. It's a massive 15 minutes coming up.
Yeah, it really is huge 15 minutes for some of the riders who would have come into this Sepang Grand Prix, fancying their chances, taking the spoils and the 25 points here tomorrow. One of them being Alex Marquez, who is already safely through, of course, into that second qualifying session. It was tight. Alex through by less than 700ths of a second, 58.057. As became the senior reporter, he wasn't really at his best after that crash yesterday. A fast crash going through turn 7 in FP1. We saw the lip of the curve sort of pick him and his Ducati up, and I think he just tweaked the muscles in Alex's neck, and it was a pretty uncomfortable ride for the remainder of day one. He has finished that morning session out here in 7th place, 58.752. Tight session, that one. It was just over half a second covering the top 10, less than a second covering the top 15, down from Marini to Miller. Perfect qualifying boost, isn't it? Up for Marini, coming up in a heavyweight and stacked Q1 session. It's the Italian that leads FP2.
Luca Marini, Frankie Morbidelli, both setting 158.4s, just 7,000 split them. Pecco Bagnaia third ahead of the second factory Honda, Joan Mir. RC2 on 3Vs flying so far. Fermin Aldeguer, fifth from Fabio Quartararo, Alex Marquez and Marco Bezzecchi. Of course, another Q1 participant shortly. Joe Zarco and Pedro Acosta completing the top 10. Ralph Fernandez, who we saw lifting himself up to 11th ahead of Miguel Oliveira and Pol Espargaro. Fabio Gian Antonio, Jack. Lorenzo Salvadori and Alex Rins, who took to the gravel on the final corner right at the end of the session. Sonkia Chantra, Augusto Fernandez also had a fall, and Michele Pirro completing your field of 23 here.
So Marini looking in tip-top form before he comes up next. Our opening 15-minute session here in Sepang. The fight, the battle for our 20th pole position of 2025 is coming your way shortly here in Southeast Asia. Who will be on pole position in the Grand Prix of Malaysia in 2025? Luca Marini could be the one. He's P1 at the end of FP2 with the Italian in Q1 next. Welcome back then to the Sepang International Circuit. List of some big names. Luca Marini